Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Film Focus, episode 184, the review for Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Ladies and gentlemen of the North, South, East and West, and welcome to another episode of Film Focus. I'm your host, the Hypersonic55, and I'm glad that you decided to join me once again for some film-related discussion. And here we are. The year is almost over, but before that ends, I have one final review that I need to give you. Now, annoyingly, this should have been out last week, but due to all sorts of shenanigans involving work, my other podcast, and a few other things I tried to watch prior to December ending, I just wasn't able to make it happen as quickly as I would like, but as you can tell from the title of this episode, we're finally talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 3, easily one of my most anticipated films of 2024. And if you are familiar with this podcast and who I am, then you know that Sonic is pretty much my everything next to Dragon Ball. And I have had so much fun watching these films over the last few years improve with how much they do with the characters, the inserting of video game elements, and how much passion and effort seems to be put into them every time. And with the lead up to Sonic 3, with the marketing slowly showing up with the logo and the use of that classic Sonic Adventure 2 theme song, the posters, and then the eventual trailer that took ages to come out but was so badass, and then the second trailer came out and it was still pretty hype. The early word of mouth came out about it and it was pretty good as well. I'm not even going to hide anything behind any preamble. Sonic 3 was so good. It was genuinely delightful, and it had so many satisfactory moments where I felt so many joyful highs from the internal parts of my soul. Certain things I never thought I would see in a Sonic film came to life. And you can tell that there was so much passion and effort that was put into this when it came to the story, how the characters were handled, and the action, good lord. And the video game references, they got better. And obviously, with this film directly adapting one of the most notable Sonic stories and certain characters from Sonic Adventure 2 and then bringing it into this film, this is one of the most focused, layered, funny, and just downright fun video game adaptations I've ever seen. Now, obviously, I have a little bit of bias as a Sonic fan, so I know certain things are coming. I know how they've decided to streamline, remove, or change a few things here and there. But as an overall piece, I think it is one hell of a movie, and it's definitely worth watching. And I'm so glad because there's so many of my friends who have brought their children, and they've had a good ass time with it as well. So even people who are casual fans or completely removed from the Sonic fan base have been having a good time with it as well. So there's clearly something in the air about like how well this film is doing that is like, resonating with people, which just makes me so happy. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this film isn't perfect. There are certain elements that I didn't like in the previous films that have crept their way into this one, and certain characters or certain plot elements could have been rejiggered or outright removed and would have made for a better experience. And for as many things as they have like implemented in this film, there's a few more things that could have upped the ante just a bit more. However, if you want a little bit more detail, we'll go and talk about the story, characters, and presentation. And don't worry, this is spoiler free. We're not going to talk about any of the key elements. I may do a spoiler-based episode later on in January, but we'll see. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump in. Alright, and now it's time to talk about the story, and it can be summed up as the following. In Sonic 3, we see the return of our favourite anthropomorphic heroes in the form of Sonic, Tails and Knuckles as they face a new enemy in the form of Shadow the Hedgehog. A hedgehog that looks very similar to Sonic, except he is faster, stronger, and causes way more chaos. He has a very painful and complicated backstory, and the heroes, as it stands, cannot take on this enemy without some help. So they go to their old adversary in the form of Dr. Ivor Robotnik to team up to take on Shadow and the mysterious bad guy pulling the strings in the background in the form of Dr. Gerald Robotnik. And that is a way for me to summarize the film without going into the area of spoilers. Now, I think the story in this film was pretty good, and I really like the fact that they did a better job of telling a more focused and cohesive story than what happened in the previous film. Now, I like a lot of things in Sonic 2, but one of the things that was noted, especially when rewatching the film a few times, is that it feels a little bloated and feels like there was a few too many elements going on, especially when it took away from the main characters that we're interested in seeing, and seeing a lot more going on with the human characters that just felt a little tedious and took away from the stuff that we actually wanted to see. But with this film, it felt tighter, and thankfully, because they were adapting material from a video game that has a very clear story in terms of how that started and concluded, they did a really good job of being able to take that source material, condense it, and tell it in a way that still kept all of those core elements intact, but made it more palatable for not only children, but also people who aren't fully invested in all of the key elements of the video game that would take a little too long to be able to tell within 2 hours. That being said, the film still retains a lot of the elements that came before when it comes to its humor, when it comes to the character development and the themes. And I think for the most part, it's still pretty solid. I did like the darker tone, some of the drama that was introduced in this film, and the fact that there was a lot more character-focused stuff. But at the same time, there are some of those sillier, weirder elements that just get in the way and prevent the films from being a bit more. Now, at the same time, I understand this is made for children, so there are compromises that are going to be made when it comes to how dark the material can go, and there are certain things that I guess in either test rooms or stuff that comes up in the writing department, which they think is still going to be like funny and entertaining for children and families. And some of the stuff in this film is hilarious, and I think that is mostly due to pretty good comedic timing from the voice work of the cast, and obviously Jim Carrey doing double duty as two versions of Robotnik. But at the same time, there are certain things in this film that just make me question, just maybe go, why is this here? Certain things that really didn't need to be, that either needed a second pass in the writing department or could have just been stripped out altogether. And again, I can't talk about those elements without going into the area of spoilers, but there were at least 2 moments in this film where I'm just like, this is the best you can come up with. I am, again, disappointed. But thankfully, there was not anything that overstayed its welcome too much, and wasn't nearly as tedious as what came with either Sonic 2 or some of the more dreadful material that we had to endure in Knuckles. The Knuckles TV show is genuinely just painful. And thankfully, while there are just a couple of allusions to that TV show, there's nothing in there that made you have to watch the Knuckles TV show in order for it to feel relevant in Sonic 3. But again, what is one of my favorite aspects of these Sonic films is the fact that there is such a strong focus on characters learning lessons, going through trials and tribulations, and becoming more by the end of the current entry. With Sonic, there is this interesting through line of him becoming a hero, finding connections, and learning about like those life lessons that make heroes who they are. And again, they do a really good job of highlighting the fact that Sonic, even though he is like a pretty capable individual, he still has much to learn, he still has much to lose, and still has to face a lot of like crazy scenarios. And again, he is a much better character for going through all the things that he's gone through. And the way that they introduce Shadow in this film and his backstory as well is again pretty effective. And there's just moments of heart and depth and emotions that, again, you wouldn't expect with Sonic, especially considering how lighthearted or like how silly some of the games have been. Obviously, there are moments within the Sonic series where they do go dark and do have these more interesting storylines here and there, but the ones that are executed well are few and far between. And again, Sonic games aren't known for having like the best of stories, but when they hit, but it's very inconsistent. So to be able to see that in a more narrative-focused form, in the form of the movies, and see how well they've handled things, is just something that makes me very happy. And then, of course, when it comes to the video game references, there are so many so many lines of dialogue, visual things, audio things, and they are sprinkled throughout the film and utilized in such a good way. I mean, they've been done pretty well in the previous entries, but I feel like this one not only had the plot points that they were borrowing from Sonic Adventure 2 and certain elements of Shadow the Hedgehog, but there are so many other little things that if you're an eagle-eyed Sonic fan, you can see it from a mile away. And again, you can see the passion that has been put into this from a story and presentation perspective, but there's also a lot of passion coming from the characters as well, which we'll move on to right now. Alright, and now it's time to talk about the characters, and I think the cast did a great job in this film. There are so many moments where we get to see all of our various different characters get to stand out and have their moments. Obviously, the clear front runners in terms of the people who have the most memorable material are Sonic, Shadow, and Dr. Robotnik. Well, technically two Dr. Robotniks in the form of Ivo and Gerald. But yeah, I do want to give a special shout out to Ben Schwartz as Sonic. I feel like he's really started to come into his own as this new incarnation of Sonic, because as mentioned before, there have been various voices of Sonic going all the way back to the 90s when Jaleel White was the first major voice actor for Sonic. But then after that, when we got into the 3D video games, you had people like Ryan Drummond and then Jason Griffith coming along, and obviously Roger Craig Smith is the current version of Sonic. But then you also have that gentleman who started voicing Sonic for Sonic Prime recently. But then you have a few other people that have been in the interim period who have put their stamp on the blue blur. And with Ben Schwartz, I think he's done a great job of not only capturing the fun, playful energy, but also creating a character who feels a little bit more three-dimensional, where he has more insecurities, where he's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more sad and lonely. And again, the version of Sonic in these films is so endearing because he has just so many more layers and more time to be introspective, have these moments where he's like a teenager. His emotions are running a lot higher and he's not capable all the time, and he has lessons to learn, and he has like all these things that go on with him that are character building moments. So when you go from the first film to the second film, you can see that he's adapting, he's learning, he wants to become a hero, but he doesn't have the tools yet. So he has to go through a few more trials and tribulations and then realizes, you know what, don't have to do everything on my own. I can do it as a team. And then in this film, it's all about him becoming a leader, learning how to adapt, and also learning about where his limitations are. And the return of Idris Elba as Knuckles, he is still just as fun, intimidating, and hilarious as before. He has some absolutely banging lines, and Elba has this really good comedic timing with the rest of the other cast members. And again, Knuckles proves why he is like one of the best characters, because he has really good moments to be strong and tough, but also has these wise lessons to impart on Sonic as a warrior. And Colleen O'Shaughnessy has been Tails for so long now. I feel like she's just doing it without having to try, but she imparts this really cute, infectious, and enduring energy to Tails that just makes him so delightful to watch on screen. He has these really good moments with Sonic and Knuckles, and just as a trio, they act so well together. They have just really good back and forth. But again, Tails just has these really fun moments where he not only gets to be the gadget guy, but makes use of himself in very cool moments in the film, which is really fun. And of course, we have to talk about Keanu Reeves, who is voicing Shadow. Now, I am still interested in the world where Hayden Christensen would have voiced Shadow, but I think Keanu Reeves does a good job because Shadow has this sort of very low energy, and while he does emote, I think Keanu brings the right level of energy to this role. Shadow feels like a layered individual who has been shaped by his past. Things are complicated, dark, and brooding, and he has his history with Maria, his only friend, during the time when he was alive 50 years ago. And there's just a lot of things going on with him. And while they didn't go as deep as I would have liked with the character in the film, I think Keanu did a really good job of like just inserting the right kind of energy to the character, and he was delightful in the movie. But I believe the main person that people will be talking about after this film is over is Jim Carrey, who played Ivo Robotnik, returning from the previous two Sonic films while also playing the grandfather of the Dear Doctor in the form of Gerald. it was always going to be an interesting idea to bring both of these characters back and have them in the same time frame when you know how the character was portrayed in Sonic Adventure 2. And I think they did an interesting job of updating and changing a few elements here and there. And Jim Carrey was clearly having the best time ever. There were so many moments where these characters were just saying interesting lines back and forth, and there is one sequence in particular which was just insane, but it was so fun, making use of a very notable music song from about 20 years ago, and it was just fab. I did not expect to like it. It was so pointless, but it was fantastic. And again, it's just fun to see Jim Carrey bringing that sort of crazy manic energy that made him so fun and interesting back in the 90s, and still be able to bring that kind of chaos in the 2020s. It's mental. However, there are certain moments where I feel like the humor of the Eggmen does get in the way of some of the more serious elements that came with the character from the game. And there is a sequence towards the end which was made me question, just like, why is this a thing? And something happens towards the end of the film that feels a little anticlimactic. Again, I won't say what it is, but it was just like, that's the way you chose to do this? Okay. But as it stands, again, Jim Carrey was just killing it as he always does. Super fun. And just in terms of the rest of the cast, James Marsden and Tika Sumpter as like Tom and Maddie, they're still really fun from the previous film. They have a more reduced role, but what they do in the film was still pretty good. Lee Majdoub as Agent Stone. He has been one of my favorite people since the first film. He is the devoted servant slash friend slash lackey of Dr. Robotnik, and he has so many moments. It feels like every time with each new entry he gets more time to shine, and I love this man. He's so good. He has so many great moments in here. Alia Brown as Maria, she was good. I just wish there was more of her in here. Kristen Ritter, I love her, especially obviously from Jessica Jones, but in here I thought her character would have at least a little bit more significance, but she was just kind of there. And then there were the people that I think were just a little superfluous. Adam Pally returns as Wade, and thank God he wasn't in here too much. And Natasha Rothwell as Rachel and Shamar Moore as Randall from the previous entry. I thought they were going to have a more significant part to play in this film. They were unnecessary. I mean, they were okay at what they did, but again, I just didn't need them to be in the film. Alright, and now it's time to talk about the presentation, and it was almost completely flawless. Visually, this film was excellent. I've liked the look of the previous films, especially when it comes to the CGI, cinematography and action, but it has only gotten better with every new entry, and in Sonic 3 it feels like the culmination of what's come so far, except executed on a higher level. There's just a greater sense of confidence and refinement when it comes to the visual presentation, and it feels like the director and everybody in the presentation department have learned what works, what doesn't, and how to push the envelope in terms of giving you the most pitch perfect material that you can get. And I think one of the best places to start is just with the action in general. It is just insane. Whether you're talking about the chase scenes or the fight scenes or anything else, it is meticulously crafted with really good choreography, dynamic camera angles, and a larger scale than what's been seen before. And the animation blends with the live action footage so well. Something that was criticized, especially in the previous entry, where there was certain times where the CGI and the live action footage didn't mesh as well, or there were certain moments that the green screen just looked a little bit more notable. But here I feel like it's just way more refined and just looks a lot cleaner than it did beforehand. And we get to see so many scenarios where we get to see a little bit more than what came before in terms of different lighting situations, and more time where you get to see the characters up close. When it comes to the CGI, Sonic, Tails and Knuckles have not looked better. You get to see greater levels of detail, richer colors, and plenty of moments to demonstrate their quality, especially when it comes to recreating certain aspects of what makes these characters so great in the video games. And then obviously there's Shadow the Hedgehog, who is beautifully realized in this film with all of his distinctive details, from the red highlights in his black fur to the gloves and shoes, the way that he runs and teleports. It's all wonderful. And again, the action scenes are absolutely fabulous. So many crowd pleasing moments, and you just get to see how powerful and interesting characters like Sonic and Shadow are when they are at their peak, taking each other out. or fighting against each other. And there are some moments towards the end of the film which I will not spoil, but basically if you are a shonen anime fan, there are moments where it is literally just as hardcore as some of your favorite kind of fights within that kind of thing. So if you're into that, you'll have a good time. And then there is, of course, the film score, which I think is a much needed improvement over what came before. Now, when it comes to the film score, one of the greatest failings of the previous films was the fact that there was a lack of music from the video games. And with the films being as they were, being worked on by Junkie XL, they had a lot of their own original material. And while I think some of the compositions that Junkie XL did in the first film were decent, I don't think there was anything that really stood out. The only notable material that came out of those films was the small utilization of the video game stuff that was put in there. And again, we only got pittance amounts in the previous films. So in Sonic 1 and 2, all we heard was 3 little variations of Green Hill Zone. In Sonic 1, we got a little bit of Green Hill Zone in the opening credits and a piano rendition towards the end of the film. And in Sonic 2, again, it was a little bit of Green Hill in the intro and the OG version of Green Hill that was used as a ringtone during the wedding scene. And the only other bit of Sonic music that we got was the use of the OG Hyper Potion song from Sonic Mania that was used during the opening portion of Sonic 1. But beyond that, nothing. And again, it's a piss take because Sonic has such a beautiful catalogue of music over the last 30 plus years that could have been utilized. I think there are some really good stuff that could have been done from Sonic 3 and Knuckles Adventure 1 and 2 and even Unleashed that would have worked with the previous films. But again, for whatever reason, they just decided to let Junkie XL just do his thing and make his own original compositions, which again had moments here and there, but overall was not very memorable. And I've got no beef against Junkie XL. He's not really just made anything that was of interest to me. And while there are certain moments within his filmography of the stuff that he's worked on that was decent, the only stuff that I really liked was in Mad Max Fury Road. But here, he's found a way to finally insert more stuff from the video games into this film. And while it's not as comprehensive as I would have liked, what they put into this film was pretty effective. And while I won't ruin the main song that was utilized in this film for those who don't know, for those who know, it's been part of the marketing from the outset, and it is put to very good use in this film as a leitmotif, which is sprinkled throughout the film in various different forms. The best way for me to describe its usage in this film is how they made use of the Techno Syndrome theme song from Mortal Kombat 2021, the reboot, where they took that theme song and sprinkled it all over the film in various different forms. So if you knew what you could hear, you knew what it was. And they made good use of this song in this film. And there is a very crowd-pleasing moment where the song shows up in a very epic way, where internally I was fist pumping. I was having the best time ever. So yeah, it was really good. But since we already know that there's going to be a Sonic 4, I can only hope that they make more usage of the other songs from the video games, because there's so much more they could do with this. And there is a use of one song from Sonic 06 that I did not expect to hear, but it was a very welcome addition. Okay, so now it comes to the conclusion. Overall, Sonic 3 is a damn good time at the cinema, and I'm glad I saw it, and I would highly recommend it to everybody. Now, while I don't think this is the slam dunk that some are making it out to be, at the same time, entertainment is subjective. So this may hit you differently depending on how much of a Sonic fan you are, how satisfied you are with the end result, whether you're willing to forgive certain elements, or if you're just looking for a fun time at the cinema and don't care about all the extra video game lore that nerds like me like, then again, you'll probably have a good time. I think, again, what makes these films so special is the time and dedication put into the story in terms of the themes and life lessons and the characters who all feel very layered, go through journeys and come out of like these films as more fleshed out individuals who you can actually give a crap about, which, again, I don't mean to come for the Mario movie, but that film, again, had 10 out of 10 presentation, but had the depth of a puddle in terms of what they were doing with the characters and plot. And while there were certain moments where they had interesting ideas, those films just have characters that are just devoid of any depth or interest. Whereas the Sonic films have been going from strength to strength, adding all these extra moments for these characters to breathe, to have emotion, to have conversations where they are learning and growing. And again, the amount of effort and passion that's going into these films is so easily seen with everything that transpires, and it makes me super happy that it exists. And I just have to tip my hat to Jeff Fowler and all the people that worked on these films, because you can tell they give a crap, and that's what we need with these adaptations. I will see this film again, maybe another 2 times. I definitely will be seeing it as soon as humanly possible. But that's my review. Now I turn it to you, ladies and gentlemen. What did you think of Sonic 3? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? How do you think it compares to the previous ones? And whatever your thoughts are, just again, drop them in the comment section below, or hit me up on Twitter where I'm at Hypersonic55, or on Instagram where the Film Focus podcast exists. And also, again, Film Focus is on Twitter as well. And check out the podcast where podcasts can be found, obviously primarily on SoundCloud, but we're also on Spotify and all other places. And this is the last major review for the year. I will have a top 10 coming out, but I don't know if I'll have it done before December is over. If not, then you'll probably see it in the first few days of January. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Anyway, thank you for listening as always, and until the next time, this is Hypersonic 55 signing out. Peace.